उपविश्य मम वाचं मां प्रसुप्तां सञ्जीवयत्यखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम्। गुरुं हि स्वयं सत्यः प्रज्ञाभक्तिविनीतयः दीप्तिश्चापि प्रदा नित्यं तं गुरुं प्रणमाम्यहम्। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। $35 27 26 sorry 31 31 okay. गूढोत्मा भुवनेष्वयं न सकलैः ज्ञेयो वृतो मायया बुद्ध्या सूक्ष्मिकया पुनर्यं सूक्ष्मेक्षणैर्दृश्यते। विद्वान् हृद्युपसंहरेद्गिरमिदं चित्तं च बुद्धौ महत्येनां पञ्चमहान्तमान्तरतमे शान्ते प्रतीच्यात्मनि। यज्ञानं पतदुर्गमं सुनिशिता शस्त्रस्य धारा यथा शब्दस्पर्शमरूपमव्ययमजं नित्यं ध्रुवं चारसम्। निर्गन्धं यदनन्तमेत्य पुरुषः मृत्योर्मुखान्मुच्यते। विद्यासु जागृतनराः तत्प्राप्तुमाचार्यिणः। श्रोत्रादीन्द्रियसञ्चयं स भगवान् शब्दादिबाह्यार्थगं चक्रे यत्तदसौ पुमान् बहिरिमान् भुङ्क्ते स्वकैरिन्द्रियैः। धीरः कोऽपि यदेन्द्रियोऽनुभवति स्वं प्रत्यगात्मानमत्राप्तुं मोक्षमुशन्न धीरहृदयः कामी तु मृत्योर्वशः। लोको येन समीक्षते ध्वनिरसः स्पर्शांश्च दुःखं सुखं रूपं गन्धगुणं च जाग्रति तथा स्वप्ने सुषुप्तावपि। अज्ञानं हृदयेन्द्रियाद्यविदितं यस्यास्ति नो किञ्चन ज्ञात्वा स्यात्ममहेश्वरं मधुभुजं धीरो न शोचत्यमुम्. Next is done, no?
Next is in the middle.
In the middle, yeah, next one. अभ्यो यः प्रथमं महानुदभवत् सर्वेश्वराद् ब्रह्मणः भूतैः साकमिह प्रविश्य हृदयाकाशं च यस्तिष्ठति। यः प्राणोदिति नामकोऽर्थगिलनाद् यः सर्वदेवात्मकः सर्वात्मानममुं तमेति पुरुषः यो ब्रह्म जानाति सः। So we were looking at the commentary of verse 35. verse 35 is a paraphrasing of two mantras which we saw. The two mantras are 6 and 7, right? Okay, the two mantras. So here he was Ramaraja having explained the content of the verse. The two verses are Yatash. What is that mantra?
Yeah, Imam. Sorry, 6 and 7. So
Yah purvam tapaso jatam adhyah purvam ajayata guham pravishya tishthantam yo bhutebhir yapashyata etadvaitati yah pranena
sambhavati
aditir devadamayi guham pravishya tishtantim yabhutebhir vyajayata. Okay, so that is what we are seeing now. So having explained the meaning in brief, Ramaraya takes up a interesting discussion. So this is what I was just telling in the previous class. So if you look at page number 32, so the paragraph which explains the meaning of the verse in short ends with the statement Yasmat loke suvarnajjatam kundalam suvarnameva bhavati tasmat brahmano jataha hiranyagarbhaha brahmaiva bhavati tatascha hiranyagarbhajnaha brahmajna eva iti bhavaha. So this is the statement that he was making. So here we need to understand the term Hiranyagarbha. See, I was trying to find out where we may find some nice crisp definition of Hiranyagarbha. But we do not find this explicitly described in the Upanishads that we know of. So in the Upanishad, there are various Upanishads which speak of various Srishti Prakarana, but we do not find a description of Hiranyagarbha coming out of somewhere. With this term, we don't find. Okay. But Bhagavad-pada in a few places in his commentary touches upon the word Hiranyagarbha. So I was just trying to trace, and so someone told that in Siddhanta Bindu somewhere it is there. So I was trying to trace today. In Siddhanta Bindu, which is written by Madhusudana Saraswati, in the explanation of the 8th verse. So 7th verse goes like this: Na shasta, na shastram, na shishyo, na shiksha, na chatvam, na chaham, na chayam prapanchaha Svarupavabodho vikalpa sahishnuhu tadeko vasishta shivah kevaloham. This is the 7th. The 8th one is Na jagran na me swapna kova sushuptihi na vishvo na va taijasah prajna kova avidyatmakatva trayanam turiyaha tadeko vasishta shivah kevaloham. Repeat. Na jagran na me swapna kova sushuptihi na vishvo na va taijasah na vishvo na va taijasah prajna kova avidyatmakatvat trayanam turiyaha tadeko vasishta shivah kevaloham tadeko vasishta shivah kevaloham avashishtaha ekaha aham shivaha. So this is where the essence of Vedanta lies. So after doing the Nishedha, whatever remains is aham. So this is what it declares. Now, in this context, Madhusudana Saraswati tries to present various information which will be useful in understanding the essence of all these verses. So there he brings in some context, the notion of Hiranyagarbha also. So how does he bring in what context? So here the three avasthas are described, right? Najagram name swapnakova sushuptihi navishvo nava taijasaha prajnakova. So in explaining this, so he brings in the kind of a srishti prakriya and various other things also in the discussion, and the various other classifications also which we can find. So there he describes nicely how we have to understand the word Hiranyagarbha and Sutratma which are employed. So today I will start with those 2-3 sentences which are found in Siddhanta Bindu before taking up Ramaraja's commentary, which may be useful in understanding this commentary. So there is something called Sthula Sharira and there is something called Sukshma Sharira, which we are familiar with, those who students of Vedanta. Sthula is something which is evidently seen. Sukshma is something which is not seen by us, okay, not evident. The presence is not evident, but the presence cannot be dismissed, okay. So this is how we have to understand the Sukshma is something which is in subtle form. Now the Sukshma Sharira is supposed to be made up of 17 things. What are they? Pancha Jnanendriyani, Pancha Karmendriyani, Pancha Prana, then Manaha and Buddhi. So these are the 17 things which constitute the Sukshma Sharira. Madhusudana Saraswati, explaining what are the 17 elements, he states certain things. So the statement is interesting. I will not bring in from the beginning of the discussion, but I will just quote a couple of sentences here. He says, Shabdasparisha Ruparasa Gandha Grahakani Shrotraktva Chakshu Rasana Granakhyani Pancha Jnanendriyani. So he lists, this is Shabdasparisha Ruparasa Gandha Grahakani. Shabdasparisha Ruparasa Gandha Grahakani. Grahaka means that which fetches you the information. Understand? So Grahakani is the adjective to Granakhyani Indriyani. Shrotratvak Chakshu Rasana Granakhyani Pancha Jnanendriyani. But he doesn't stop there. There is some other interesting sentence which has been added here. Okay. He says, Tvak Chakshushi Swagrahya Gunashrayam Dravyamapi Granhataha. This is some interesting thing which this is an interesting observation. Understand? So of the 5 indriyas that we are referring to, so Shrotra receives sound, right? But the Shrotra does not have the capacity to sense the entity which produces the sound. Is this clear? See. So Shabdasya Ashrayaha Yaha. Okay. So that cannot be fetched by Shrotra. You can only receive Shabda. So that is why he is trying to make a distinction. Tvak, on the other hand, what does Tvak do? Sparishagrahaka. So what is the definition? Sparishagrah.
Tvak. Sparishagrahyo. Tvak.
Ghranagrahyo guno rasaha. Ghranagrahyo guno gandhaha. Chakshurmatragrahyo guno rupam. Rasanagrahyo guno rasaha. Ghranagrahyo guno gandhaha. Tvagindriyamatragrahyo gunasparshaha. This is how it is defined. Tvagindriyamatragrahyo gunaha sparshaha. Now sparsha is defined as this. So tvagindriyamatragrahya. Now this tvak, sparsha, suppose I touch. Okay. So I touch. So this tvak fetches the information of sparsha to me, right? But the tvak also fetches the presence of something. So where does sparsha remain? So sparsha is there in all the four bhutas. See, prithivya, tejo, vayu, vritti. So this tvak can, see, suppose I touch this, I can close, but I touch, then I sense what it is. See, if I touch a fruit, so it is sort of piercing. So then I can say it is a big fruit. I can immediately say it is jack. I need not. So this tvak has the ability to sense the dravya also. So besides sparsha. Okay. So not only the guna, but also the dravya. Similarly, chakshuhu has this ability. Chakshu gives the rupa, fetches the rupa, it also fetches the existence of the padartha. Okay, so that is why he is just bringing this division. Tvak chakshuhi swagrahya gunashrayam dravyamapi grinhataha. Whereas the other things don't do that. Okay, of the five sense organs. Okay, rasana, it can only fetch you the taste. Okay, so it cannot fetch you the information that that entity exists. Okay. So that is the distinction. Then one more thing that he says is Shrotramapi chakshurvadi gatva shabdagrahakam. This is another thing. Okay. Gatva granhati, remaining in one's own place, it receives information. Gatva granhati is another thing. Okay, that we will not get into now. Then comes the next sentence is, so this is with reference to jnanendriyas. Then he says, Vachanadana gati visargananda janakani. Find out, see. Vachana, adana, gati, visarga, ananda janakani. Vak, pani, pada, payu, pasthakyani, panchakarmendriyani. Vak, pani, pada, payu, pasthakyani. Vak is speech. Pani, see, vak, pani, pada, payu, upasthakyani. So these are the, so there is voice and there is some speech. Okay, vachanam. See, vachanam is speech, we can just say. See, vachana, adana, taking, gati, visarga, excretion. Then ananda janakani, pleasure. Vak, pani, pada, payu, upasthakyani, panchakarmendriyani. Having said this, now Madhusudana Saraswati says, Yetacha sarvam militva sapta dashakam lingam. So now we just described 5 plus 5. So other 5 plus 2 is already described. Okay. Put together these 17. See, Yetacha sarvam militva sapta dashakam lingam jnana shakti pradhanyena hiranyagarbha iti. This is very interesting, useful definition. Understand? Yetacha sarvam militva saptadashakam lingam Jnana-shakti pradhanyena hiranyagarbha iti kriya-shakti pradhanyena sutramiti cha uchyate. See, the group of 17 can be broadly divided into two types. One is this Jnana Shakti Pradhanya, the other is Kriya Shakti Pradhanya. So some of them are engaging with Jnana, responsible for Jnana, and some of them are responsible for activity. If you want to describe it from the viewpoint of Jnana, so with the emphasis on Jnana, if you want to describe, you will use the word Hiranyagarbha. If you want to emphasize the activity of this, then you will use the word Sutratma. So which means both are one and the same. Okay, so this has to be very clear now. So that is why this sentence is very useful for us. Yetaccha sarvam militva saptadashakam lingam Jnana-shakti pradhanyena hiranyagarbha iti kriya-shakti pradhanyena sutramiti cha uchyate. Having said this, he further says, Ayam amurta padarthaha karyatvat vyashtau samashtau cha jivopadhireva. This will be useful for us in trying to digest what Ramaraja is trying to say. So he says, Ayancha amurta padartha. This has to be understood. The Sharira is a murta padartha, whereas this group of 17 which we are referring to here, whether it is with reference to the activity or with reference to the jnana, whatever is the activity with which they are engaging themselves with, so it is amurta. Ayancha amurta padarthaha. Amurtaha means something which cannot be seen as possessing form. See, ayancha amurta padarthaha karyatvat vyashtau samashtau cha. See, so for us, we can just think of so many amurta padarthas which are there. So for instance, even the waves, so which are going to be received by our mobile, it is an amurta padartha. The signal, where do you see? The existence can be felt through some instrument. Existence or non-existence. It is not something which is evident to our sense organs. That is what we mean by amurta padartha. Similarly, when you say this chakshurindriya, ghanendriya, etc., their existence cannot be seen by you, but it can be felt by us. Okay? If it is functioning, then the indriya is. So this is how we understand. So here, ayam amurta padartha karyatvat. This is also a very important term. See, this is not karana, but it belongs to the goshti of karya. So this is karya and karana. So even with reference to the srishti prakriya that we have formulated, so we have atmana akasha sambhutaha and so on. All of them belong to the goshti of karya. And here from the amurta, certain things emerge. These 17 entities are coming out of the amurta form of the bhuta, sukshma forms. Okay? Then emerges the sthula form. So this panchikrita pancha mahabhuta is the sthula form. So this entity we are referring to as the sukshma form, and therefore he is describing it as ayam amurta padarthaha. So amurtaha parantu karya gosthau pravishati karyatvat. So then he uses the word vyashtau samashtau cha jivopadhireva. So this is something which we have to associate with the jiva. So there is something called ishvaropadhi, there is something called jivopadhi. So where will you put this entity into? So it has to be put into the domain of jivopadhi. Okay? So Vyashtau means with reference to the individual, and Samashtau with reference to the collective also. It has to be conceived as Jivopati. Now let us come back to Ramaraya's commentary with this understanding of the term Hiranyagarbha. Now if you see this sentence, Brahmano jataha hiranyagarbha brahmaiva bhavati. Is this clear now? Tasmad jataha means it belongs to the domain of karya. Okay? Tasmad jataha, it belongs to the karya goshti. After that he says, now he brings this discussion which has been presented in these two mantras with the overall theme that has been presented in the Kathopanishad. Here, so what was the question that was posed? The question has to do with the Pratyagatma. So this Nachiketa's question was connected with the Pratyagatma. Yayam prete vichikitsa manushye astityeke nayamasti iti chaike. Prete means with reference to the individual. Understand? Vichikitsa manushye. Okay? So with reference to an individual, there is a question. Is there something which is beyond this sharira or not? Beyond this mind-body complex or not? This was the question. So here, this is Pratyagatma Vishayakaha Prashnaha. So Nanu Pratyagatmanaha Sarvatmatvam Bhaktum Upakramya. So the earlier mantras were related to Sarvatmatvam Bhaktum Upakramya. So you wanted to describe this Pratyagatman, but this Pratyagatman is not to be connected with the individual alone, but it is to be understood as only one entity. Pratyagatma Brahmanoho Abhedaha. See, Pratyagatma Paramatmanor Abhedaha is what you want to establish. So this Pratyagatma is something which is felt by every individual, and if you want to establish Abheda, it cannot be Nama. So therefore, he is asking this question. Nanu Pratyagatmanaha Sarvatmatvam Bhaktum Upakramya. So where did you end up with? He says, Hiranyagarbha Brahmatmakaha Sarvatmakaha iti kathanam asangatamiti chet maipam. Because this mantra he was just mentioning. So in the previous mantra, if you look at it, so it was just mentioning Yaf Prano Didinamakotha Gilanat Yasarvadevatmakaha. Later half of the verse. Yaf Prano Didinamakotha Gilanat Yasarvadevatmakaha Sarvahatmanamamum. You see, there are two parts to it. So one is the Sarvatma. Okay? Sarvatmanamamum Tameti Purushaha Yo Brahma Janati Saha. Okay? So now Saha Brahma Janati. So this Hiranyagarbha was brought into. How was he brought into? Aditinamakaha Arthagilanat. Understand? Aditinamakaha Arthagilanat. So he was explaining all that. Now, without this Sukshma Sharira, can you think of any kind of experience? The Indriya Gola may be there. The Sukshma Sharira is responsible for fetching this jnana or for any activity that you may have to do. Okay? So this experience, so in any form that you can think of, even at the level of mind, buddhi, etc., whatever you can think of, is only through the Sukshma Sharira. So the Sukshma Sharira Samashti, just now as we saw, so it is this group, Samashtau Vyashtau cha. Okay? So both aspects, at the individual level and at the overall level. So all of them, so this is referred to as Hiranyagarbha. Okay? Now he is saying, the question here is, Pratyagatmanaha sarvatmatvam vaktum upakramya. Etadvaitat. Tat means that pratyagatmak question that you are asking. Etat means this description that we have given. Okay. The sarvatmatvam vaktum upakramya. Hiranyagarbha brahmatmakaha sarvatmakaha iti kathanam asangatam. Asangatam means this doesn't seem to be logically convincing. See, sangata means it gels well. It doesn't seem to be logically convincing. Asangatam iti chet maivam. Don't think like this. These two are connected. How are they connected? Now he explains. So what he states in this sentence. Yo buddhi guhayam lingena sakam tisthati saha jivaha pratyagatmeti sarva sampratipannam. Sarva sampratipannam means it is accepted by every individual universally. Understand? Sarva sampratipannam. There is no doubt. So what is understood? Yo buddhi guhayam lingena sakam tisthati saha jivaha pratyagatma. By this term. Yaha buddhi guhayam lingena sakam means this linga which we are talking about. Saptadashakam lingam. Understand? Lingena sakam tisthati saha jivaha. This individual. Jivaha. If you want to refine it more precisely, aham pratyaya vishayaha. Understand? Aham iti pratyaya vishayaha. So we say aham janami, aham patami, aham shrunomi, aham gacchami, etc. These are all the activities of the sukshma sharira. Okay? So Brahma Sringena sakam tisthati saha jivaha pratyagatmeti sarva sampratipannam. Tasya cha. Now, where is the jignasa? Doubt. Tasya cha ekatvanekatvayoreva vipratipattihi. Vipratipattihi means viruddha pratipattihi, vipratipattihi. Viruddha pratipattihi means doubt. In fact, this Advaita Siddhi commences with this Vipratipatti Vakyam. So there is very interesting that Vipratipatti Vakyam will itself go to some hundreds of pages. So anyway, this Vipratipattihi means Viruddha Pratipattir Nama Jnanam. Viruddha Pratipattihi, Vipratipattihi. So you say something, I say something. Okay, he is good, he is bad. Okay. So this is how it is. Viruddha Pratipattihi. So here, where is the Viruddha Pratipatti? Ekatva Anekatvayo. Ekatva of this Pratyagatma and Anekatva of the Pratyagatma. Understand? So Pratishariran Jivaha Bhinnaha. So this Ekatva Anekatvayoho Vipratipattihi. Now, Sacha Anena Parihrita. By making this statement, he says that Vipratipatti is dismissed. Okay? Anena Parihrita Bhavati. It has been solved. How? Sarvatma eka eva hiranyagarbha sarva prani hridguhayam bhutais sakam tisthati iti vachanena. Okay. So these seems to be somewhat unrelated things. So just carefully we have to listen. The word Hiranyagarbha has been introduced in order to refer to all the sukshmas, shariras together. Samashtau Vyashtau cha. Okay. So all the sukshma shariras put together is referred to. Okay. So that is what is Hiranyagarbha. Okay. That is what he will be explaining. Samashtilingopādhihi is the next sentence. You see, tasmat Samashtilingopadhihi. See, Samashtilinga Upadhihi. Samashtilinga means if for all the lingas, all these lingas form the upadhi of whom? All the lingas form the upadhi of whom? So that entity you refer to as Hiranyagarbha. Okay, this is a name which has been given. So if you want to refer it to with reference to the jnana, you use the word Hiranyagarbha. If you want to refer it to with respect to activity, sometimes Sutratma is used. These are used in different contexts to explain different things. So we need to understand. See, there is something called energy. Now, this energy, I mean, you may use so many adjectives depending upon the context in which you want to explain that energy. See, sometimes you will use solar energy, sometimes you will use this energy. The same energy gets transformed into electrical energy depending upon the device into which it goes into. Okay, so that turns into another energy, that turns into another energy. Depending upon the context, you use different terms to explain that activity. So similarly, here the word Hiranyagarbha is used in that context. Now he is saying, Tasmat samashtilingopadhihi pratyagatmaiva hiranyagarbha iti kritva hiranyagarbha sarvatma brahmatmakaha iti kathanam prakrita sangatameva. So let us understand this little more clearly. I will read once more and explain. Sarvatma ekayeva hiranyagarbha sarvaprani hridguhayam. So is this clear now? So you consider any prani. Okay, you consider any prani, and this prani, in order to get sukha, it engages. In order to avoid dukkha, it tries to move away. This refers to the activities, right? So you go somewhere and then you have terrible smell, so you return back. So there is not, today I will not walk in this road. See, sometimes when I went to China, I remember, I was tempted to go around. I went into one street, unbearable. Highway was okay. But into that street, if you go, that is all terrible smell. Everyone is eating outside on the roadside. So then I returned back. Now this pravritti is activity. You understand? So that is again by this Hiranyagarbha only. You understand? So this pravritti was there and nivritti is also there. So this is activity. The Sutratma in me, so drove me there. And then the Hiranyagarbhatma in me, so recognized, and then the Sutratma returned back. You understand? It is the same thing. So this is how we have to understand these terms. So now he is saying, see, Sarvat, so the statement that you find in quotation here is basically what is there in the verse. If you read the third quarter and fourth quarter, Sarvatma ekayeva hiranyagarbha sarva prani hridguhayam bhutais sakam tishthati. Okay. So this is a paraphrase of what has been stated in the verse. He is saying, so this is very easily understandable. Sarva prani hridguhayam tishthati. So we refer to the samashti of the Sukshma Sharira, which is obviously present in every being, and this collective is what we refer to as Hiranyagarbha. So the collective in all the beings which is responsible for fetching this jnana to you is referred to as Hiranyagarbha. And this is there in every prani. Okay? Therefore Sarvatmaka, it is there in every. So now he is, you see, Sarvatma ekayeva hiranyagarbha sarva prani hridguhayam bhutais sakam tisthati iti vachanena tasmat. Now samashtilingopadhihi. Samashtilingopadhihi pratyagatmaiva. So you can, with reference to the individual, you will call it as Pratyagatma. With reference to the collective, you will call it as Hiranyagarbha. Okay. So with reference to the, so now this Pratyagatma cannot be different from Hiranyagarbha. So So the collective of Pratyekatma is what you call as Hiranyagarbha. So therefore he is saying Pratyekatmaiva Hiranyagarbha iti kritva. This Hiranyagarbha is Samashtilingopādhihi Pratyekatmaiva Hiranyagarbha iti kritva Hiranyagarbha Sarvatma. You understand? So now this Hiranyagarbha is Sarvatma. Is this clear? So Hiranyagarbha is Samashti and therefore it has to be Sarvatma. Hiranyagarbha Sarvatma. And that we just saw. See, Tasmad Utpannatvat Tadeva, therefore Brahmatmaka. Okay? So Sarvatma Brahmatmakaha iti Kathanam Prakrite Sangatameva. So therefore there is absolutely no contradiction. So saying that this Pratyekatma, see, Pratyekatma Sarvatmakaha and this Hiranyagarbha Sarvatmaka, so we understand from different perspectives and therefore these two are not completely different things. Okay, so you have essentially said the same thing. So now he further explains, he is asking this question, Nacha Vyashti Purushaha Pratyekatma. How do I understand? Vyashti Purushaha Pratyekatma. You try to say this, right? Vyashti is individual. So Vyashti Purushaha Pratyekatma, Samashti Purushaha Hiranyagarbha. Even then I find that these two seem to be different. Vyashti Purushaha Pratyekatma, Samashti Purushaha Hiranyagarbha. These are the two terms that you are employing. Now he says, see, Samashti Purusha Tirikta Vyashti Purusha Bhavat. Vyashti Purusha Tirikta Samashti Purusha Bhavat. So this will be very easy if I give you a simple example. This is how I think in certain other places we will find the Vedanta text explained. So this statement you have to understand. Samashti Purushatiriktam Vyashti Purusha Bhavat. Vyashti Purushatirikta Samashti Purusha Bhavat. So think of a dense forest. What constitutes the forest? The trees and the creeper which have grown. Right? Can you think of a forest without the trees and the creepers? That is what he is trying to explain here. Understand? Samashti Purushatirikta Vyashti Purusha Bhavat. Vyashti Purushatirikta Samashti Purusha Bhavacha. So this is what is the connection between this Hiranyagarbha and Pratyekatma. Without this Pratyekatma, there is no question of Hiranyagarbha, the concept of Hiranyagarbha. Okay? So the concept of Hiranyagarbha is essentially inclusive of this. Okay? So that is what he is trying to say. Samashti Purushatirikta Vyashti Purusha Bhavat. Vyashti Purushatirikta Samashti Purusha Bhavat. So if you look from a larger perspective, you call it as a forest. So if you go and look at it as an individual, so it is described as a tree, it is described as a creeper, and so on and so forth. Okay. Then he says, Vibhoho Pratyekatmanaha Parichinnatva Bhavena Vyashtitva Yogach. This is another thing that we need to understand. This has to do with, see, though you are trying to understand this Pratyekatma only when associated with the Sharira. You have to be very clear now. So this individuality of this entity arises only in connection with connecting this entity with this Sharira. Okay? So, but truly speaking, this entity is, Atma is Vibhu. So because it is not confined to this Sharira. You are speaking of an entity which is beyond this mind-body sense complex. So strictly speaking, it is Vibhu. By its nature, it is Vibhu. But when connected with this mind-body sense complex, it is limited. So we understand it as Pratyagatma when we connect it with this. Therefore, he is using both the phrases. Vibhoho Pratyagatmanaha. If you understand its true nature, it is Vibhu. Okay? But if you try to localize it in this, so then it is limited. Okay? So, Vibhoho Pratyagatmanaha Parichinnatva Bhavena. The Parichinnatvam necessarily arises the moment you associate with Sharira. Okay? So, once we understand that this is beyond this mind-body sense complex, then it becomes Vibhu. And therefore, it is with reference to that true nature of this Atman. So, he is referring to as Pratyagatmanaha Parichinnatva Bhavena Vyashtitva Ayogacha. So, this Vyashti is something which you associate only when you tie it with the Upadhi. Truly speaking, it is not something which is Vyashti. Okay? So that is what is the idea. Now, he says, Nacha Jivaikatve. Suppose you are saying so. So what are you saying now? Pratyagatma is not Vyashti. So Pratyagatma is same as Jiva. Right? That is what you are stating. See, such a Jivaha Pratyagatmeti Sarvasampriti. Right? That was the sentence which we read. So, Naja Jiva is a Jivaikatve. So, this seems to be boiling down to say that Ekatva, Jivaikatve, Sukha Dukhadi Sankaryamiti Vachyam. Okay? Sukha Dukhadi Sankaryam. Sankaryam means if you are Sukha, I should be Sukha. Okay? So everybody has to always have this Sukha. But that is what is not happening. Okay? Suppose all of you are enjoying Vedanta, everybody should be enjoying Vedanta, all other people. Okay? But that does not happen. For some people, Vedanta is Dukkha Janaka. How do you explain this? Okay? Nacha Jivaikatve Sukha Dukhadi Sankaryamiti Vachyam. So now he says, Antahkarana Bhedena Tadupapatte. That is explained by Antahkarana Bheda. So that is explained by Antahkarana Bheda. So the entity may be same, but so to which it is tagged, this is different. So this impermanent entity in whose association you assign this name to this entity is different, and therefore it will be different. It is like this simple, right? The teacher teaches. There are 58 students in the class. Kaschit pratipadyate, kaschit na pratipadyate, kaschit viparitam pratipadyate. See, so how will you understand this? Teaching is the same. Teaching same or not? So now it is this antahkarana bheda. Okay? And the state of the antahkarana also. So both of them play a role. See? So that is how teaching may be same, but the knowledge transfer that is happening varies with the antahkarana of the individual who are engaged in the activity. Similarly, so this Pratyagatma, see that in the Chaitanya form, in the Sukshma form, it is same, but it is similar. See, solar rays, they fall on a steel plate. they fall on the surface of the water. They fall on the solar panel, right? Your head. So it falls on various places. Okay, the receptor is different. Okay, so this connection that happens through the antahkarana, it happens, and since antahkarana is different, so this Chaitanya which is associated with the antahkarana, okay, so does not experience the same sukha or dukkha. Okay? So that is what it is. Nacha jivaikatve sukha dukkhadi sankaryamiti vachyam antahkarana bhedena tadupapatte. Now he says, Nacha pratyagatma ajatvat paramatmaiva pratamajatvat hiranyagarbha na pratyagatmeti vachyam hiranyagarbhasyapi hiranyagarbhasyapyubadhikatvamev janma upadhikamev janma na swabhavikam swataha tasyapi paramatmatvena ajatvat tasmat eka eva pratyagatma linga samashthyupadhina hiranyagarbha iti lingavyashtyupadhibhihi indraschandra ityadi shabdaihi vyavahriyate. So this is how he tries to summarize. See, Pratyagatma. So the question now is, this is something which is interesting. He is just presenting the same thing by posing various steps in which will be useful in trying to have a much better clarity. So what did he say now? Hiranyagarbha is something which arises, right? Hiranyagarbha, it is a karya. Karya means it does not belong to the Karana Goshti. Right? So this Linga Sharira, the moment you say, so it is something which is arising. It is Utpadyate. Whereas this Atma is described as Najayate Mriyate va kadachit Nayam Bhutva Bhavitava na Bhuyaha. This is how it is described. That is the point he is trying to say. Nacha pratyagatma ajatvat paramatmaiva. Understand? So you are trying to find this equation, right? So he is asking this question. This pratyagatma ajatvat paramatma. But Hiranyagarbha, you say it is jata. So that is the question that he is asking. Prathamajatvat Hiranyagarbha na pratyagatmeti vachyam. You should not say. Why? He is saying Hiranyagarbhasyapi aupadhi. Should be aupadhikameva. See, aupadhikameva janma. There is a typo there. Okay. So aupadhikameva janma na swabhavikam. Understand? So it is only with reference to the various antahkaranas and various other things. So you describe this collective as when it is associated with all this, you have coined this term, and therefore it is aupadhikam janma. So it has been created as a theoretical construct to refer to this, and therefore aupadhikameva janma na swabhavikam swatastasyapi paramatmatvena ajatvat tasmat. Therefore, what is the conclusion? Eka eva pratyagatma linga samashthyupadhina. So linga samashthyupadhina. when you conceive of all these lingas as upadhis, so then you coin the name Linga Samashthyupadhina Hiranyagarbha iti Linga Vyashtyupadhibhihi. Linga Vyashtyupadhibhihi. You conceive of one Antahkarana, one Chakshuhu, one Shrotram, and so on. Then you call it as Indraha, Chandraha, Ityadi Shabdaihi. This is a very interesting usage. Indras Chandraha iti. So Indraha is Devata, Goshti, and Chandraha is some other thing that you can think of. So whatever it is, so these are names that have been tagged with the reference to the individual characteristics. Okay, so therefore Vyashtyupadhibhi. In fact, this can also be understood in a metaphorical sense. So in even our Vyavahara, see, we say, our Indran Chandran avana stotram pandra. You understand? So this fellow is praised as Indra. So Indra Chandra, this is he is. There are various places in which you will see. Suppose he would have done some sort of a philanthropic activity. So people will say, so he is a Dharmatma, embodiment of Dharma. So you will just describe. So various kinds of praises are showered upon him. Okay? So this is what is used. This Indra Chandra is a phrase which we will use. Okay? So Indra Chandra, so it has to do with the activity. Understand? So with that activity, you will describe him by that term. Indras Chandraha ityadi shabdaihi vyavahriyate. Okay, I think we'll stop here. Om Sarve Sukhina Santu. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Sahana Bhunaktu. Sahavirya Karavavahai. Tejasvinavadhi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sarve Sukhina Santu. Sarve Santu Niramayaha. Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu. Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om